All right, welcome everyone to a regular meeting of the Norwich Planning Commission. We have a quorum of Ernie Ciccatelli, Mary Gorman, Christian Spalding, and Jan Lasbra. And so we can get started. We have two more members, Vince and Bob, that we know will be showing up hopefully in 15 or 20 minutes, but we may juggle the agenda just a little bit to stick with to keep the real meaty stuff for when they get here. But let's go forward. Can I have a motion on the agenda and we'll go from there?
Motion to approve the agenda as drafted.
Second. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
I've got a comment. I really want to talk about the letter that was sent by Stephen on December 30th or 31st. I don't know that that's a specific agenda item or not. It was in here as a point of
Yeah, it would be on agenda item 8, and I'm happy to talk about that.
Okay, good. Thank
and
you.
we may move that forward.
Okay.
If we're waiting for those guys.
Okay.
So, yes, understood.
Thank you.
Any other adjustments, questions, comments on the agenda? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Public comments on items not on the agenda. Anybody?
This would be your moment, Jeff, Sonia, Adam. Do you unless you have something specific on the agenda?
It was to support the bike effort. I didn't know if that was an agenda item. I was told it was, that's why.
It's
If it's not, I can.
Well,
it's going to roll into the municipal planning grant conversation. That's my intention, and I think that's what Miller was thinking. So he will have looked at the agenda and timed appropriately, I believe.
Got it. What do you have a sense of what time that will be?
Can I move that if you want to have comment or support entered, you could do so now and not necessarily have to for an hour and a half to.
Yeah, that is probably not going to be for an hour. So
if you want to enter later.
Yeah, that's fine, Christian. I agree.
Thank you.
Do you have what you need?
What's that?
Do you have what you need?
Yes. Can I just record you as being present and in favor?
Supporting that initiative.
Okay.
Right.
And Adam, what's your last name?
Pierce.
Pierce.
P-E-A-R-C.
Okay. Yes. I've seen you in my office before.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Any other comments at this time? Even on that topic, if people want to do it first. Okay. Correspondence. Do we have correspondence, Stephen? Isn't on agenda items?
No, we don't.
Okay. Capital planning. We had a couple things. Stephen, you had an idea or a thought, and this gets to the question of how do we get some traction on this topic? How do we bite off a bite-sized morsel that might be chewable? And I had a very limited idea, and I think Stephen had something else. So why don't you go first?
Sure. I guess my recommendation to sort of get this ball rolling again might be to go through an effort of sort of looking at our current infrastructure chapter in the town plan as it's written today, and try to map out a delta between what we would need to do to have it have that be sort of approvable as the town plan element in a capital plan. I think that would give us, I think that would set some boundaries for the, for the effort. It's pretty straightforward in terms of lift, and it does keep the ball moving. So I think in general, that would be a good next step.
How do you see that relating to the specific question of utility and facilities plan? Is that geared toward that? That's clearly stated as the first thing you have to do that kind of opens the door to any broader
Yeah.
topic. Is that
I
in
think
that direction?
Yes, and to answer your question, there's probably some, basis in statute, that the town, that element of the town plan has to comply with. So it'd be good to sort of review what we have already, in terms of that compliance and, in that process, understand where we would need to go to be compliant.
Okay. Is that something you can take the first cut at, or you want somebody, a PC member to participate, or what do you think?
I can certainly do that, but if anybody wants to volunteer to assist me along the way, I will not say no.
Well, I think that it sounds like
my thing before, so and I passed the book already, so I'm happy. Like when you get it going, just email me, and I'm happy to
okay.
collaborate as I can.
Yeah, that'd be great, Christian. I think that the point is to look where we got what we're starting with, and then
I'm sort of starting.
whatever the lift is, then we decide.
I can take over.
Okay, whatever you,
Yeah.
I think Jan has something to add on capital plan.
Okay, so finish that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Stephen and you and Christian can really just document the starting point. What would we have in the current town plan that starts to check boxes on more comprehensive capital plan, utility and facilities plan, that kind of thing. My suggestion, and I mentioned this, I think, at a previous meeting, was a very limited inventory exercise focused on town buildings that relate or could help put Tracy Hall context, Tracy Hall's visioning activity that they're going to do, the select board's going to do in the next month or two, in context. So, and I reached out to Chemo on this because he's the one pushing for the select board to look at Tracy in a little more broader, open way. My point was, can we simply do an inventory of town buildings in the broadest sense, town, churches, Grange, farmers market building, and list inventory, meeting rooms, small, medium, and large meeting rooms, offices, things, so that when Tracy Hall is trying to say, oh, okay, how many medium-sized meeting rooms do we need? We can have a spreadsheet that says, well, the Grange is going to have upstairs and downstairs, and that one has a stage, and and we need a large open space. Okay, what's the size of the proposed farmers market building? So we would have a full town inventory.
This is a space planning exercise to see what we have, but you're blending both public buildings and privately held buildings when you think about the Grange. As
community resources, as realistic community resources, I'd say that's part of the point.
And help, just if you could just close the circle on the kind of why space planning for building purposes for the town is in our remit. I guess I'm not totally following this. Because space planning, I mean, to keep a space plan up to date, et cetera, is a big job, right? And, does it have technology? Does it have this, that, and other thing? Is it accessible? Right. Is there bathrooms?
Yeah, do the bathrooms have showers and so on and so on? Yeah, I think agreed that it's definitely part of if you take capital plan and then take the specific starting point of utility and facilities plan, town buildings is first one on the list of the things you need to inventory in the utility and facilities plan. So that would include, you have a highway building and it's this size and it has machinery bays and all that stuff is part of it. To your point, that's specifically town buildings. My question or the thing that I'm opening it up to help with is the Tracy Hall conversation to say, from the point of view of meeting rooms specifically, but it could be offices, it could be public bathrooms, it could be. So it's just an idea that I was bouncing off Chemo, and it may just be something that Chemo asked the town manager to do to help talk about Tracy Hall. And doesn't need to be connected to us talking about capital planning.
I mean, just thinking about all that we're trying to accomplish and what's a reasonable amount of goals to try to do, that to me is a big project. And so I'm just trying to understand it in the context of what are our goals for the year and how do we try to get everything done? And where does that fit in the priority? And because, look at Steven's got a department of one, plus a little bit, but he doesn't have a lot of, he's got a lot on his plate. So just thinking about that.
No, I agree. I mean, I guess I would just put it out there as an informational statement that if I get any traction with Chemo and we make a list that we feed into the select board, that's totally different than any kind of official part of a capital planning process. So I wouldn't burden it as a planning commission activity and make it any more serious than that. So point taken. Let's take what Stevens proposed as a minimum to keep this thing alive, and then just go with that. Okay. So that's it for capital planning. So we have Vince. Is Bob off camera or is he not there yet?
Over here, sorry. I'll speak.
Right.
It's not picking me up. Sorry, I thought the
That's all right. No, I just wanted to make sure because I think short-term rentals is the pithy topic that I wanted to make sure we had a full complement. So let's jump into that. So we have a draft, another draft, which clears up a couple of questions and adds some edits that came from people. And so I think the purpose or the goal here tonight, if we can, is to get something that this body agrees to and is ready to pass on officially into the process heading for the select board. So with that, I would open it up to comments and discussion.
Would it be helpful if I brought the draft up on screen for people?
You can. I mean, it's 3 pages, and I got it up.
I've got mine up. I've got mine up.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if the people
do other people need it?
Find it. I think a lot of it's the detail stuff, but the key points to me are that we're proposing an interim bylaw, which has specific legal enablers and the 2-year time limit. So that's an important context. We define short-term rental. We have no leeway defining short-term rental. That is the state definition that if you want to have statutory authority over short-term rentals, that's what the definition is. So that's a given. We cleaned up and clarified the definition of owner-occupied to make it clear it was the sole primary residence and that it was a tax-based definition. And then it's an allowed use in all zoning districts on an owner-occupied lot as defined.
Mhm.
I think the rest of it is details and definitions and regulations about everything from parking to septic and so forth. But those are the big highlights.
All right, sorry, are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay. We can't, but,
I don't know.
yeah, okay, everybody's got it. I'm not gonna worry about it anymore.
Okay. So, comments, thoughts, any changes of heart, thoughts?
I had a question I wanted to add is,
Yep.
the noise ordinance or regulation, what was, the thought behind removing that?
I didn't feel it was necessary to have, two definitions of noise thresholds.
Okay,
One that applied specifically to short-term rentals and, and everything else. So, we have pretty specific, thresholds in terms of decibel levels and times, and types of, exemptions to noise violations.
already for every
Yeah, in
resident,
in that section.
got it, okay.
Um,
So you just got rid of the time, I guess.
yeah. So there's two thresholds of decibel, levels between sort of 7 in the evening and 7 in the morning and 7 in the morning. So daytime and nighttime,
Okay.
I think it's 65 at the decibels at the property border during the day and 50 at night.
Okay.
But the point really is that the current noise ordinance applies and
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
be used if it gets out of hand. You would tell them they're breaking the noise ordinance. You don't need an extra thing.
No need for more law, more rules.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Ernie?
Yeah, I see the separation, I mean, the definitions of owner occupied and short term and all that sort of stuff. But I thought when we were discussing this last, we were sort of not going to encourage, or we're going to discourage large, corporate ownership of these things. And to me, it looks like that's actually allowed under these rules. And I'm not, I'm just trying to remember if did something change or what?
Well, the corporate entity would have to live there. So,
Well, I mean, if you have
in that sense, it's not an investor. You couldn't be an investor owned. That was, I think, the term we were using was investor owned, and they would have to reside on the property.
Well, the way I'm trying to read it here, the way I read it is it dimensions multiple. It says every owner has to be listed. And I mean, that kind of means it could be any number. There's no limits to the number of owners or anything like that. Well, it's unless you have like some big group house, in which case, if they're living there, I mean, let's say there's a half a dozen people owning the place, and it's big enough for it. It kind of doesn't make sense. And literally, unless it's literally somehow somebody did something dumb like I did, which is put my kids on the deed. Um, you know, I mean, you're not, I bet you there's no one else in the town that's done that. Not on purpose anyway.
Ernie, where's the language you're looking at?
He's looking at six A.
6A, okay,
6A is saying list of all property owners. Each property owner must provide address of their.
It's pretty strict and stuff. I mean, I'm not arguing. There's not a lot of requirements there, and I mean, they each got to have list their address. Well, I mean, right now, what you just said sounds like they would all have to have the same address.
No, so let's ask a specific question because it's a good point. Given a property with multiple owners, are we simply requiring that one of the owners resides on the property? Is that Is that our intent, and does the language say that?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. I mean, 'cause
So
I think you can only have one homestead declaration on a property, right? So if two people own it, one person can take that declaration and the other can't, or is it gonna be split?
Well, the declaration actually goes to the property itself. It's for property. It's basically to deal with property taxes. So the property is gonna have one property tax. So it doesn't matter. I mean, husband and wife own a house. The tenancy by the entirety. That the house is really what gets the benefits of homesteading and all that sort of stuff.
So it's a good point. Let's clarify, because there are plenty of houses in town owned by trusts. So our house is owned by trust, and we are the two beneficiaries of that trust. So, and we live here. But does being the beneficiary of the trust qualify as owner occupied? We're kind of,
Well, we can define.
it does.
We might have to define that as we might have to make if that's the kind of trust it is. I mean, some trusts, a
Right.
corporation could say, well, if we say trusts and just leave it at that, they'll just have trusts, and we'll still end up with a corporate owned. We'll end up with corporate owned housing, which won't be responsive to us. So you have to say, define the trust as in. I'm not quite sure what they call a trust like you're talking about that you have, but we have to make sure that people understand it's a trust where the owners, the occupants are the beneficiaries of the trust, and we have to define it that way, and they are residents on the property. They are in residence of the property. That has to be sort of all tied together to me, so that we have a clear understanding that that's the kind of trust that we want. And we don't want, by saying that that's the kind, when we would say in our regulations, trust means this. Trust is, and and anything other than that does not count as a trust for the purposes of this regulation.
So this is Section 6A is essentially you have to list all the property owners, and if it is owned in a trust or LLC, the ultimate owners and or beneficiaries of such entity shall provide. So that in the permit process, you have to list all of the people who are the sole owner, owned in trust, owned in an LLC.
And by the way, I got to bring that up too.
Sorry, just let me finish.
Okay, I just want to.
One of those names has to reside at that property, right? I mean, is that what we're after here?
But I believe so, but I don't know my trusts well enough to know how many weird combos there are. Ernie?
Well, for starters, a trust can basically mean anything you want it to mean. But the other thing I interrupted for only so that I would remember it, since I'm pretty airheaded today, is the LLC. How come I'm just curious why you chose LLCs but not corporations, because corporate form might be useful too, even to private people who, so I'm not sure if you should just limit it to LLCs and trusts. You might have to, corporations are valid and legal.
Is there a generic term to sort of encompass all of these vehicles?
No, because each vehicle has a separate kind of use.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
just to say something that might be the other side of the boundary, what we're not wanting to allow is an owner who hires a property manager and they reside there.
Yes.
Right. That we're saying. So, okay, the owner's representative would be on site, but we're saying that's not good enough.
Right.
So we're definitely drawing the line there. But we're saying if there are multiple owners through some legal vehicle,
Doesn't matter what.
at least one of those owners lives on premises.
Right. And one thing,
I think, John, if you do, I mean, I'm just on the Vermont tax website, but entity ownership, which is CRS Corporation, limited liability company, et cetera, no one is able to claim the property as an individual homestead in that situation. Which there's a whole litany of trust examples where they go through, walking through ownership examples and when you are allowed to claim as a trust or a homestead or not, and who is there 50% of the time, et cetera. But by using the April 1st tax declaration, corporations could not ever claim it as their homestead. It's not allowed right here.
Okay.
And so what are the implications of what you just read to these proposed?
So the way I read that is basically if you're only allowed to rent it, a short-term rental more than 14 days, if you can declare it as your primary homestead, that gets rid of the investor owned or corporation owned or S company or all those other issues.
Okay.
that's
Because legally
There
the
are a
state,
lot of homes that are owned in trust.
Yeah, I mean, I won't pretend to be an expert, but
Yeah.
drawing a trust is not the homestead of the beneficiary unless the claimant is the sole beneficiary of the trust, and there's all these examples. So
Yeah.
trust ownership's allowed,
Look at that
I got
too.
this John, someone in your house claims that as your homestead. And that seems to be allowed under Vermont statute, but
right.
again,
Trust-
I'm not a tax lawyer.
a trust isn't a corporation most often. So I mean, or an LLC. I mean, it's the corporate forms that the corporate type of ownership we're not trying to encourage.
Right.
That's using the homestead, saying that at least one owner must be eligible for homesteading,
Right.
and then let them work out the details of what form, that the state's going to allow them to give the homestead. So the homestead person has to live on the property,
Mm-hmm.
and then and it can have any number of other owners, but the one who is able to claim it's a homestead, and that may also limit the number of other owners too. I don't know how the state's going to handle that, but the thing is we don't have to actually define what kind of entity owns it. We can say, does the person who's living on the property, are they able to claim it as a homestead?
Yeah, if we can piggyback off of the state's legal
Yes.
exercise, if we can just, with one line in our ordinance, pull in all kinds of legal specifics from the state side, then great. That sounds like
and speaking, asking just sort of personally, you're able to claim homestead, even though you're a beneficiary of a trust.
Correct.
Okay, so
and it says that's an example of joint ownership. It even says like if two people jointly own a home, one person lives there 50% of the time, the other does not. The example is the person who lives there 50% claims homestead, but only gets a 50% ownership interest for tax purposes. So I think if we just leave it as is and say like you have to be able to declare this as your homestead on April 1st, I think we cover.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
So declared as a homestead annually by April, or do we prefer that at least one owner must be eligible for a homestead declaration?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
And
right now, the definition reads, owner occupied shall mean occupancy of the premise by the property owner's sole primary residence domicile where the owner resides as declared by a homestead, declaration annually by April 1st for tax purposes.
That's good.
Okay.
I will take care of you're not having to define the form.
Can you,
Don't have to even
Stephen,
worry about trusts.
it would be helpful just to confirm, because we'll get this question from the select board or from the public as this goes through the process. If you could send that specific thing to VLCT and say, here's the kind of stuff we're talking about, because there are plenty of other towns that have different versions of this and opinions that have been given. So we don't need to hire our own lawyer. Let's just
Sure.
confirm with VLCT what we're trying to do is make it so somebody who is one of the owners is residing there. Does this do that the way we want it to? And just get them to say, yeah, you're right, or add this little clause.
Okay. Yep, that is a good idea because I don't think any of us are tax attorneys. So
Well, we don't want to hire one just for this when we've got one.
yeah. Okay.
So just to summarize, Wild Wild West, if you do it under 14 days in a calendar year, you don't have to register, do whatever you want.
Under 14?
Once you trigger the 14-day total days in a calendar year or a period of 30, or some whatever it is, then at that point you have to register with the town and comply with all this commands.
So it sounds like short-term regulations as written in statute are fairly closely aligned with this tax scheme that we were looking at. So we may be safe.
I see. Yeah, they've tied them together already.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you can
Well, I think that's a
rent
good
your
idea.
house.
I will run it by VLCT to double check.
Okay.
How do
Any
you guys
other-
feel about the fee structure?
The $250 or what else?
Yeah. I mean,
You trying
that's,
to make money, or are you trying to discourage it, or what's your thinking?
I just sort of pulled around other towns that are doing it. That seemed to be the price that people were paying. It's not totally out of line with permits that need to go in front of the DRB. And this does have a higher degree of review than a standard sort of building permit. So I'm okay with it. I don't think it's not a huge number in such that it would discourage people. But
Well,
you know,
it should match. It should be justifiable based on the kind of effort that you're putting in to do the review, and okay, it balances out how many they have in the first 3 nights of renting it. They're going to be able to pay their fee, and then the rest is gravy or whatever. It's not half their profits for the year.
yeah. And, just to be clear, there's, if we pass this interim ordinance, it's not like the existing ones are suddenly zoning violations. They're simply pre-existing non-conforming uses. People can, willingly come into compliance, but there's no.
So we should be ready to answer that question. That will clearly come up in public hearing and at the select board. What about my neighbor who's still doing it and they don't live there? Who is doing it and they don't live there? What about the McKenna Road properties that brought this in front of us? So you need to state that, and then and say that's the situation. That's the same situation that if your neighbor's lot was non-conforming and too small, or we changed the zoning and it became non-conforming, you're not going to go backwards and make them change it.
Would that continue after changing ownership?
There's language in here to transfer the short-term rental to a new owner.
Mm-hmm.
But I would, in that case, I'd probably want them to come into compliance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there something that would make them come into compliance?
Yeah. Does this have enough legal teeth? There's a very interesting article on Stowe today where Stowe is getting quite serious, where they are capping the number of short-term rentals and then not allowing any new ones, and then making them sort of die when the property transfers. And so you will get attrition of the number as the properties change hands. So, but they
Yeah,
have
and this,
some pretty strict. Do we have language? What does the language say happens to their right to do it? They have to register with you, pay their $250 for the new owner to do it. But do they have a grandfathered right to do that?
I mean, if it's a pre-existing nonconformity, which is essentially what you would call a grandfathered use, maybe. But they could presumably pitch it that way. But the regulations do say that the short-term rental permit is transferable to a new owner, so long as the new owner registers with the town, updates the short-term rental permit application, and agrees in writing to comply with the requirements of the short-term rental permit and these regulations within 30 days of sale. We could take out the updates the short-term rental permit application and just say, which implies that there is a permit in place for that use.
Mm.
By taking that out, there's no implication that there is.
Well, let me ask the group first. What is our intent? Do we want to pinch these off if the property transfers? We're talking interim, right? We're talking 2 years here.
So I asked if this was not an interim bylaw and it was like just a straight, we're updating town plan, would we still have to grandfather any existing current uses, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it seems to me like given the way it would be the most responsive to the complaints in front of us would be to basically say if the property is sold, they have to come into compliance.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have the authority to do that, but like I would advocate for that. That seems to be the most responsive to the public comments we heard.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's the most bulletproof thing. I mean, if somebody decided to appeal it,
put it on the list for VLCT questions. To say here, because if that's what we want to do, and I mean, worst case, a year and a half from now, somebody's trying to sell their house that does this.
Yeah,
they can wait 6 months until this ordinance goes out, and see how way the winds blow. So we're not locking anything in for more than 2 years with this discussion.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 questions to VLCT. If our standing owner occupied definition holds water in terms of ownerships, and what do we do in the non-conform? Because we have 0 regulations around short-term rentals right now. So
yeah.
The 16 or so we have in town are all suddenly, once this is passed, non-conforming.
But how are you and that's the question I had, like, how do we make that list? Like, are you just gonna go click a bunch of random dates as of the day this is enacted and say, like, and catalog a list and say these 15 are grandfathered in without? Or I guess that list changes a lot depending on the dates you look at, or is it?
Well, it's the date from the date these become effective, we have regulations. So any application post that date goes onto the list. Anything preceding that, there's nothing really I can do.
But you're gonna keep a list of the ones that are like, so in order to enforce this, like as of March 1st, this was enacted and there's 16 around town. In order to force the 17th one to enact, you have to know what was existing grandfather, right? Otherwise, you're just totally
so an applicant comes to me and says there was an Airbnb or short-term rental running at this property that I've just bought and I want to continue that use.
Oh, I'm not.
Yeah. Let's go back. Let's step back up a step and just say, what does this look like the day this is enacted? And I'm an owner occupied Airbnb person. I have to go register with you, correct?
Not grandfather.
No, you
Is there any incentive for them to do it? It doesn't sound like there's really any reason that they would, right? They would just be considered non-conforming and then.
we don't provide an incentive for them to do it, but if, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we can provide an incentive for them to do it.
Yeah,
Other than what this says already, that you can transfer it if it's registered.
got it.
So if they
That would be-
were legal, if they were currently owner occupied right now, it's
Yeah.
not even an existing non-conformity at that point. It's an existing conformity, except for the registration piece.
Well, we don't know if they,
No,
if
I
they
mean-
conform to any of all the requirements, right?
Right, yeah, we can't retroactively enforce these regulations.
But
So-
why can't we at the turn of the year make them need to be refreshed? You know,
They
if
do have to be
they have to
updated annually.
re-register every year,
Yeah.
then somebody who's doing it now, come the first of the year, will have to re-register. We'll have to pay. I mean, is that $250 one time or annual?
I would say annually.
Okay. So that means they're going to have to refresh. And
Yeah,
as soon as they do that, they aren't grandfathered.
yeah, as soon as they comply with the current regulations, they are conforming and not pre-existing.
So Jan, you're saying, so like the property in McKenna Road, it's currently in use. You're saying when we put this in place for the first 8 or 9 months or whatever it is, they're non-conforming, they don't have to do anything, but come January 1st of next year, they have to register with the town.
I wasn't even talking about the non-conforming ones. I was talking about the ones that are owner occupied, that are
Yeah.
legal but not registered. And I would expect them to register the next time the year rolls around, and that they would have an allowed use. And to Vince's point, they'd have to go down the checklist and have the parking spaces and so forth. But they're legal, and they just would. I mean, they don't get off of paying the $250 just because they're doing it today.
But that would be, we'd have to treat the non-conforming ones the same way. Like basically everybody would be grandfathered in for X, and then January 1st, everybody has to register or lose the ability to do it.
Yes, but if they don't register, I don't think we have many mechanisms to compel them to do it. They could just stay non-compliant. And I couldn't find them in violation
Forever.
forever,
That's what I was getting at, until they sell the property.
until they sell their property.
Because if
And
they
then
don't
what's
have
the
enough
transfer?
parking spaces, they can't do it, and we can't make them do it, because
Right,
we
because
are
we
creating
will-
new rules after they've already had
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
So,
Which is what we talked about last time, is we don't wanna get.
but that goes
Nobody
to the
likes
question
it.
of, you'd have to have a list that goes, so whenever this goes into effect, you'd have to have a current list of the 16 things that you're considering grandfathered in. And then basically, the only way you can enforce it is 6 months from now, someone complains about a new property that's showing up as their neighbor, and they want, hey, my neighbor's doing this, they're not registered, what do I do? You have to be able to check that against your list of grandfathered properties.
Even if I could make a list of grandfather properties, I mean, it's difficult to know at any one time how many Airbnbs or, short-term rentals you have.
Yeah.
Well, so they would need to
They'd have
come
to
to you.
volunteer.
If you wanted to, you asked the question. They want to sell the property, and they want to have this permit in place for the property. They come to you. You say, no, you're not. It's not owner occupied. What it doesn't conform. And they say, oh, but we've been doing this since before your ordinance was in place. And you say, prove it. And they have to come up with records, which are it's in this list here, that they have to keep records of for the last 3 years of when they were. So they would need to come to you and show things that met the definition of short-term rental happening before this date of the ordinance going into place. So it would be prove it. And
Yeah,
if that would demonstrate a existing nonconformity.
yeah.
I mean, I do think because we're talking 2 years, there's a limit to how much we need to get ourselves wrapped around the axle here. But it's a legitimate question. And maybe if we just looked at several, here's somebody who's following the rules or is in accordance with the new guidelines. They're on an owner occupied. They're going to meet all the checklists, and they're gonna. What do they do what happens to them when the thing goes into place? Okay, here's one of the ones on McKenna Road, investor owned, doesn't meet the criteria. What happens to them right after the thing goes into place? And then what if either one of those parties wants to sell their house? What happens? So we have at least 4 scenarios that would be really useful to simply list out what happens so that we can clearly answer these questions.
Yeah.
Ernie?
Yeah, I was just thinking, you were saying not get too wrapped around the axle, but I'm thinking, actually, we kind of want to have right now, I think, with the first 2 years, something that see how well see if it breaks, and find the weak spots in it. And so
Yeah.
I'm not sure that, we can we can sort of load it up with as a wish list for now and then discard. I think it's easier to discard stuff than it is to add it later.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we talked about that as one of the benefits of the interim bylaw was being able to experiment, see how it goes, and change it. Yeah. Okay. Other questions or strange scenarios we haven't thought of? Have we changed it enough to not be willing to vote on it, or are we ready? Can we go forward pending, VLCT confirmation that we've got our legal stuff in order, that legally we can do what we are intending to do? Are people comfortable enough to go forward?
Great, that works for me.
Okay. Can I get a motion to that effect? And Stephen, do you want to maybe give us a bit on the next steps piece so that the motion fits where this is going?
Sure. So the benefit of an interim bylaw, which can only last 2 years, is that it requires only a single public hearing by the town's legislative body, the select board. Sort of reading the tea leaves and sort of what's on the select board's plate, I kind of imagine that won't happen until after March. So that gives us ample time to sort of set the stage. But there's statute that describes the process of adopting interim bylaws, and there's some criteria that they have to find the interim bylaw complies with. So with a sort of two-month window, we can make that message pretty clear to the select board. But that's the next step, would be the select board to have a public hearing, take testimony, and decide on whether or not to adopt it.
Okay. So can I get a motion to approve these regulations, for the planning commission to approve them, to pass them on to the select board as amended pending VLCT legal review?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion on that motion?
Can we add to that motion, pass to the select board for a public hearing?
Yeah. Okay. Call the question. All those in favor? Aye.
All in.
All right. That's unanimous. Thank you,
Nice.
everybody. I just want to say, with the zoning regs we did here and this piece, I think we're doing what we're supposed to do, is making some concrete steps presenting to the select board that solves some of the town's zoning and planning issues. So thank you for doing our job. Okay.
Here,
Let's do the municipal planning grant update. Good news, if you didn't already know, is that we received the municipal planning grant. And so we are good to go. And the application with a lot of the details of what this entails is in the packet. But I think, Stephen, if you want to give us the background, because I think in terms of timing and pace and next steps, it's good for us all to understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so good news. We got the.
So this is the grant that says draft on it?
I'm sorry?
Let me see.
On page,
Starts.
oh no, maybe it doesn't say draft. Sorry. I'm just trying to.
No, it doesn't.
It says
Yeah.
application. It says application.
Application. Okay.
Yeah, it's that weirdly formatted. I mean, it's
FY
printed out off of
2026.
an online
Okay.
form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And I don't think you need to go into the specifics really of the application and our responses to it. Really what I'd like to focus on are is the work plan and the products and what we're going to come out with at the end.
Had we looked at this grant beforehand though?
What do you mean? We applied for it.
Yeah, but did the planning commission review the grant before is this the first time we're seeing it?
No. We wrote the application, approved the application, sent it to the select board,
Okay.
and they approved
Okay.
the application.
Great.
And
Okay.
then we got it. So
Great.
yeah, this is months in the making.
Okay.
It compressed
Mary,
towards the end.
It's an annual program.
Right, I remember that. I just didn't remember.
This is our 6th or 7th time we've applied for it
Great.
over the years.
Good.
So
And
it's funding every.
The total is how much money, Steve?
It's $28,000. With we're matching 7,000 of that, so it's
Great.
20,000 from the state, the remainder from my budget, and I've got a little bit extra. So
Great.
in total, there's about $30,000 to spend.
Okay.
Which is not a lot of work, not a lot of money for.
Not a lot of money for a lot of work. Yeah.
A lot of work. So my thinking right now, if you look at the work plan and budget, basically we've funded meetings between a steering committee and a consultant. I think it's 5 or 6 meetings. There's funding for 2 charrettes that are sort of with large thematic buckets for each. And then a drafting of the actual master plan document and some funding for sort of incidentals and mapping and graphics and things like that. So like I said, it's not a lot of money for a lot of work. And I think the best tactic in those kinds of circumstances is to go pretty slowly. As you'll see, the charrettes have they're pretty widely framed topics, housing, growth, infrastructure, resilience, community building, historic preservation. And I don't want to get to a point where we're beginning this process without having, funding this process without having sort of a clear roadmap for the outcomes that we want. So the funding's good for 2 years. I don't want to necessarily rush into, forming a steering committee and just, putting the gas pedal down for a little while, a couple of months, while I do some more background and we all do some more backgrounds about what in those particular buckets we want to pull out for the town of Norwich. So my recommendation at this point is to sort of put this on the back burner for, I don't know, maybe till May. And then at that point, I think we'll have a clear idea of what the steering committee will look like. The details of the topics that we want to dig into. We can't change the work plan, but, within the, topics that we've identified, have some, sort of more granular understanding of the outcomes that we'd like to see and the process by which to, pull those out and, have done some, do some marketing, consensus, get it, just sort of rallying support within the town. I'd sort of imagine we'd have these charrettes sort of at the end of the year, sort of third quarter, fourth quarter, and look to sort of produce the village plan first quarter of 28,
Yeah.
27.
Yeah, so that's my question, and then Ernie, I'll go to you. But my question, when you're talking about that pacing, is also how do we make the best use of this in feeding into redoing parts of the town plan? Because when we do that and we start talking about it's 2027 when we're writing this up, we better be thinking pretty concretely about the pieces of our town plan that we're redoing. So this, even more so, feeds directly into the town plan. So keep that in mind. It's not like we're doing, and it's good actually. We had a little comment during the application process. We had a question of, this, if this was sort of right smack dab in the middle of a 7-year planning cycle, it would be harder to see how it guided the town plan. But in this case, and especially on a slower pace, it's easy and good to see how it fits into the town plan. Yeah,
I agree. For our town plan to be approved, it's got to sort of comply with the regional plan and their future land use map. So this is where our local planning areas, as defined in the land use chapter of our town plan, come into play. So this is an opportunity for us to take one of those planning areas and really deep dive into what we want to do as a planning commission and what the town wants to do for the village area, which will tie directly into the town plan.
Right, which also ties into our next agenda item in one way. It relates to that village area. Ernie, what did you have to say?
Yeah, it's just a kind of a quick question. Because I don't know, I must have been asleep when we might have been discussing this or something. But under the 6.2, section 6.2, it says priority project categories. And the one that struck me that's not checked off is projects related to climate resilience and flood recovery. And I was just wondering why that was not included in the projects.
Well, it is included in the project under the general banner of resilience. I may have inadvertently not checked that box in the application form. That's probably what happens. But we're definitely going to be talking about resilience as a topic.
Is that something we're focusing more on the village center and not necessarily, if we check that would mean the entire town. I think we kind of talked about that at some point.
Yeah,
village area does have some floodplain in it, certainly, when you get around Warner Meadow and then up all along the brook, Moore Lane, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Ernie, to your point, the fact that I didn't indicate that as a topic in the application is kind of moot at this point because the application was approved, and we are planning on having resilience as a topic. Mm-hmm. So basically, just to be clear, So the two charrettes are housing that we're organizing. One is going to focus on growth, housing, and infrastructure. And the other is going to focus on historic preservation, resilience, and community building. So
So it's not forgotten, actually.
it's not forgotten.
Mhm. So,
Absurd.
yeah, Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess, one of the things I would say is just sort of this, kind of continual line through some of our planning is that growth is what happens, as opposed to having a conversation about what do we want to happen and whether that is growth or not growth. Because I do think that that's that assumption to start off with is probably not necessarily something that everybody in town agrees with.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point. I think there's arguments and counter arguments within all of these topics, and that's this kind of stuff that the steering committee and the sort of preceding time we can sort of unpack.
Right. The growth question is the growth topic is really how much, what kind, and where, and that. You got to answer all those questions. It's not just where, and we all know it needs to be this, and we need to put it somewhere. That you got to back up to ask the whole question. But I think the main point, really, given the small amount of money we're talking about, as we talked about this, one of the main things we're going to spend the money on is to drum up public conversation. The consultant and the charrettes and the meetings and the steering committee. I mean, this is a conduit for getting some of this conversation done. So it's not, we can fit in these meetings for free and not spend $30,000, but we're going to use this money to get some feedback coming out of the town.
Yeah, in a fairly limited engagement of 2, day-long or few-hour workshops. So the questions we ask and how we pose them, and what we do with the outcome of those questions is going to require a lot of thought beforehand.
Well, and I think if we're doing it slowly and we're doing it integrated with what we want to be doing in the rewrite of the town plan, then we're going to be doing other things all in parallel along the side here. This doesn't talk all that much about, it says infrastructure. Okay, that's got some transportation pieces to it, but it's only the village area, and we're going to be talking about outside the village area, and so we might choose to do a townwide survey as the planning commission redoing the town plan, and then we would mesh it with activities done under this grant.
To your point about infrastructure and transportation, the conversation Miller's had with the planning commission and with the select boards, I think clearly there is local interest in having improved bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure in the town of Norwich. One of the outcomes from this process, would be a goal to do that, to find funding to construct these features. So it's a sort of forward planning exercise where, the outcome is a design that you can take and fund for construction.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, go ahead, Mary.
But I would say, again, there is an assumption, Stephen, that we do hear about that, of course. And we also hear a lot about the fact that taxes are outrageous in this town and have been going up and up and up. And the idea of, okay, we're going to improve pedestrian, we're going to improve bicycle. Yes, I would love it. I want a pony. But I think that we need to think, these are the kinds of really tough conversations that we need to have. As much as everybody wants all these things, we also have a lot of people in this town who are really struggling to stay here and to live here and to think about how to move here. And, all those people who the kids graduate and they beeline across the the bridge to New Hampshire. So I think that it's, it is there's serious discussions about, resilience, economic resilience of this community is how do we do that without becoming a community of, really, only people with very, very high incomes who don't really give a damn if the tax rate goes up.
Yeah, I think that's all
Absolutely.
part that needs to feed into the conversation. Can we, Ernie? Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to, this is just a comment to kind of go along with what Mary was just saying. Someone recently wrote, I think it was in the listserv, that the average income in this town now is $241,000 per family. That's a wealthy family. If that's the average. But
and I bet the median is higher.
I mean, well, they may have said median. I don't. The point I'm making is it doesn't really matter. It's if that's the measure, we have too many rich people in the town.
Yeah, well,
We
we
won't.
won't.
Two guys. What are we gonna do about it? Either?
Yeah, no.
It's not a matter of what are we going to do about it, but the point is you have to start considering, the building and so on and so
Right.
forth. But
I mean, the
it's
point
still-
is you can't make decisions based on the assumption that everyone has that flexibility in their income, even though many do.
That's a clarifying. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no,
Guys.
I didn't see. I saw a hand that.
Sorry, Christian.
Wasn't- Yep.
I have just two quick comments. So, so I totally understand where these are coming, but the sentiment behind it, I would say some of these is like not doing the planning process and seeing what is available for state, federal, and there's other resources out there. The planning, like the bicycle and the pedestrian infrastructure thing we're talking about, for example, there's a state fund that is designed for these exact sorts of projects. So potentially there's state money and doesn't cost the town of Norwich a dime or taxpayers here a dime. I'll also say that as someone who's spent the last year plus here working on diversifying housing stock and affordable housing, the demand way outpaces supply here. And so if we do nothing, we're going to continue to see the median income in Norwich increase over and over and again, year over year. And so by just doing nothing, we're actually going to make the problem worse, in my opinion. And so the only way any of this, and I was at the school board meeting last week where school funding now is tied to weighted students and pupils. And one of the biggest things there is diversified economics around what type of students go to school. We are the outlier in the state where we almost zero students use free or reduced lunch. We get less funding per pupil as a result. Like there are a lot of trickle downs that could come from diversifying housing stock, getting people into the town with an entry point that's not 1.2, 1.4, 1.6 million dollars for a single family house.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
So
I don't mean to-
can we,
Jan,
Stephen, Stephen and then Miller, can we put that, and Christian I know has been involved. What are you looking at, Stephen? You're looking at, I can't tell whether you're looking at the screen or a
I'm
person.
looking at the television.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm looking at the
Just
television.
get the owl in the eye.
Yeah, look the owl in the eye.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I wanted to, I know you talked to Miller today, and I want to somehow mesh together the two conversations about Bike Ped and VTrans grant, and then this grant and the timing and so forth. And I know Christian's, signed on with Miller too. So where do those things stand, and how do we see them going forward over the coming months?
Yeah, sure. Jump in. Okay. First, I just want to respond to Mary really quickly. Totally, as a taxpayer, fully appreciate the pressures on our tax bills. I do think that biking and walking in particular is really good for low-income populations in particular. Like I understand that, sure, the town is spending money, you could increase the tax rate, but again, with state funding, I think it's important that those are seen as like actual ways to keep people here rather than something that might force them out.
Yeah.
And also from a safety standpoint, lower income people.
I had nothing against I have nothing against it. I just wanted to make sure that we think about it. Yeah.
No, totally understood. But it's a common misconception that there's like gentrification associated with these facilities. I think it's actually the inverse when you're like that. But I just wanted to make clear about that. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for considering this. You all have a lot on your plate. I really appreciate it. I also thank you on behalf of all of the other parents who couldn't be here tonight. My kid tore a bag of Cheerios open and spilled the whole thing on the floor. Came down here, so I was late. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I get that there's sort of there's a sequencing tension here. It seems like, right? You just did a lot of work to get this, the comprehensive plan grant in place. We have a lot of urgency and eagerness on the part of families to get some bike and pedestrian facilities down. I think there's also a sense of, Steve and I were talking about this earlier today, like a sense of sort of being let down by these processes in the past, not this group in particular, but other efforts to bring bike and pedestrian infrastructure to town.
Yeah.
And a lot of eagerness to just like get a win, like just get something down, get some state funding, get it implemented. I think that's some of the urgency I carry with me, because that sentiment came up in way more than one or two conversations I had with people about this issue. Some people didn't even sign because they had their heart broken in the past over a sidewalk or a bike lane, and said like, I'm not investing myself again. So that part of what's animating some of my urgency is that sentiment and a desire to get some of the gears moving where there seems to be a lot of sort of organic alignment for a particular street or corridor or crossing. How can we get something done quickly and get people sort of reinvigorated in the democratic process? I think to me, that's as big a sort of cause as a particular bike lane or sidewalk, as important as those are. So that's where I'm coming from. And I think that's where a lot of the families at Marion Cross are coming from. I understand you also have this planning grant, and I've been really deliberate in not sort of espousing a particular corridor for that reason, because I know there's a ton of opinions and a ton of good planning work happening. My point of view, but I'd love to hear the point of view of the group, is that I think that these things can work in harmony for a couple of reasons. One, I think with a sort of even lightweight sort of community input process, even just like the one I sort of ran of just talking to 50 families, was that corridors started to emerge organically. Like the corridor on Route 5 going to the farmers market or future affordable housing was one that like multiple people proactively brought up to me. It hadn't occurred to me, but it makes a lot of sense. I think it's one that's identified in the town plan. It's probably one that will come up in your charrette planning process. I get that it's a state facility, but I think it's those sorts of corridors or connections seem really obvious. And reading through the VTrans website, it's exactly the sort of thing that they like to put. It's filling a gap in networks, right? It's connecting two disparate bike lanes. It's serving potential affordable housing, food access, et cetera. It like checks all the boxes. I'm using this as an illustrative example. There are other ones, but where there's an opportunity to get a quick win, to do something that is almost certainly going to comport with the town plan, current and future, where there's an opportunity to get people inspired in a process to see that the town can move quickly on something and to have it be funded almost entirely by state dollars. That seems like it could actually be additive to the process of the planning grant. And the other thing on a more technical level is that I would, certainly as I was talking to families, I was managing expectations that this would be a scoping grant. It would not be construction. So it would be the first step in a multi-year process to actually get infrastructure funds. But it would help bring a little focus to a specific corridor where we could actually see meaningful progress on a quick basis. So the idea would be that we do that, apply for the grant, see if we can make something happen. And then you have a planning process and funding associated with that planning process that's sort of happening in harmony with the comprehensive plan, and they can talk to each other. So you can bring in that planning process to the plan and vice versa. And it's really, as you all know, like all this stuff takes years. So it's just like putting a little bit more funding, or gasoline isn't the right word, pedal power, into like the community input process, and hopefully being able to deliver something, on a timetable that will keep people engaged. I think after a couple of years, people flag. So there is a fundamental one that I'll really shut up. There's a tension that I talked about with Stephen earlier too, which is if a town wins a grant 1 year, are they less likely to win a grant in a subsequent year? And I don't know if anybody knows that formally. It's not on the VTrans website as far as I could see, but I understand that the town, it's a political process and they want to spread the money around. I totally get that. I think a narrow VTrans, pretty low dollar grant is not really going to disrupt other major infrastructure or capital projects down the line. That's my gut. We should talk to Rita at the Planning Commission to really find out about that.
Yeah.
But that tension I think is resolvable too. I think you can go after the money and get a small planning grant. It's part of this bigger planning process. And then maybe the planning process surfaces like, hey, that's actually not a priority. Let's scrap it and do something bigger or different. And then you can do that and apply for a different grant. And I think that Norwich has the political constituency and like to pull down more state funding. It just seems like it's not going to cancel it out. That's my take.
I just have a couple of comments about that, and I may have been looking at the wrong guidance. It's certainly 2025 guidance, but
Yeah.
The 2026 hasn't come out yet. But this sort of small scale pedestrian grant that I was looking at, which you linked to,
Mhm.
it's for construction and
no,
requires
there's-
50%.
There are two programs. I might have sent you the wrong link. There's a second program that has a 20% match, and it has a scoping option that's much smaller dollar value.
Okay, I think I've seen that
Yeah.
grant before.
Sorry, wrong link, my
Okay.
bad. But yeah, no, that's the one
Yeah.
we're thinking about.
Well, I mean, that sort of stopped me in my tracks when we were thinking about that, I was thinking about this.
Oh,
because
got it.
clearly that doesn't
Yeah,
apply.
of course. No, this is just scoping.
Okay, so I think I want to reserve any comment I make on sort of jointly doing this together, or side by side, until I see what the grant vehicle is.
Mhm. Okay. My colleague helps you to make sure you got the right one. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So I think I agree with you wholeheartedly that if we've got energy on an issue with a group of townspeople, that is not, that's not to be wasted. It's not to be downplayed in importance. So let's think about it and how to harness it and how not to just disappoint people for another year. That said, my question is kind of a chicken and egg question, which is until it gets specific enough, it is this corridor, this kind of project, this, until it kind of gets a name and a vision and a shape to it, it's really hard to move forward, even for, unless you, even if you made it like, here are 2 or 3 possibilities, can we get a scoping grant to sort out which one it is? Or, I don't know the options, but that's my question. If what Stephen's talking about, the planning grant, is, this long arc through the fall, and we've got energy front loaded for the topic of bike ped, but no specific clothes to hang on it, how do we turn that corner? Ernie?
I'm sorry.
Just a
I
second.
have sort of a philosophical question here. And before I don't want it to be understood to be tearing anything that's been discussed so far down. But I've been wondering this for quite a while. And some of my data may be wrong too, so I welcome being corrected. But my understanding is that, for instance, the number of school-age children in the town is declined almost by half since the generation that was going through from 1990 through whatever that would 2002, I think it would be. That was when my kids were in school. And I'm trying to figure out why, I don't recall there being any problems with the kids getting to school, walking in the streets, using the facilities that the town had and that Hanover had too, and so on. And of course, taxes were considerably lower, even as a percentage of income then as well. And I'm trying to wrap my head around why so much needs to be changed now, when there's clearly not as much need for since we deal with infrastructure. I could say the same about the school itself. It has now half as many students per teacher as it used to have, and yet kids were very successful back then too, getting into colleges. So I haven't quite wrapped my head around why money needs to keep on being spent and improvements need to be made when the people using these improvements is dropping. So, I mean, I kind of want to see that put into the conversation. I'm not saying stop, and I'm not saying let's go backwards or anything like that, but I mean, that has to be considered because there are still people alive in this town that'll be here a while longer, a number of decades at least, who are falling behind because of these changes. And that's really pretty unfair because those people have put a lot of time and effort into this town too.
Yeah, so I think it's a legitimate question. I'd be curious, Miller, you've got an excited crew of people, and what's the problem statement? I think is what Ernie's saying. You know, what is the problem statement that people are excited to solve? And I think I have my thoughts, and others will too. But I'd be curious, the group that's excited about it, where are they coming from?
Can I ask a question, Jan? So, I guess so. One option obviously would be to wait. Like, it's not necessarily that option I favor, but one would be to go through the process and then apply next spring. I understand these are once a year.
That's right.
I mean, that's a pretty like that's definitely an option. The other option is if there was interest, if like could this group as a deliberative body take initiative, have public comment on, I mean, at least scope if there was an interest in using this vehicle and applying for this grant to scope out, say, Route 5. Like Route 5 South has come up in almost every conversation we've had for, I don't know, 8 months. It's with the farmers market, affordable housing, with Two Rivers, with the planning grant, like basically everything we've talked about, at least in some component, has had that corridor there. So I, for one, would be willing to at least open discussion, get public comments on that corridor being the initial focus area. I don't know what your thoughts or the planning commission's thoughts on just like putting something out there and seeing what feedback or response is.
No, that was part of my chicken and egg thing, is if without too much conversation we can crystallize something specific, I think it would go a long way to move it forward. The one I'd throw on the table as well is there's a long-term project state planning level to run a bike path corridor all the way up the river, basically along Route 5, the whole length of Vermont. And they know it's going to take 15 years, and they're just piecing things together. But so if what one of the things we're doing is along Route 5, and it could be farmers market to center of town, and it also could be center of town heading down Church Street, heading down Route 5 north, that fits in a very big context state. It's not even the state, it's a whole bikeway initiative. But anyway, I think if we could get, without too much work, a specific idea to at least scope, we could move something forward.
That's really good to hear, Jan. And thanks for the suggestion, Christian. I think that the group of parents and families I work with are certainly excited to support that sort of process. And I think, again, organically, that corridor just happens to be coming up. And to Ernie's question about the sort of problem statement, I think a couple of thoughts. One, there's a ton of latent demand for biking and walking that's invisible most of the time. So just because you don't see people out there walking and biking doesn't mean that people don't want to do it. And in fact, they're probably not doing it precisely because there's not good enough infrastructure. I know riding my 3-year-old and my 6-year-old on the sidewalk on Main Street is pretty harrowing. And like just all the crosswalks and everything, right? That's not a real facility for biking, but people do it. And there's actually a surprising number of families that do it because it's the only option that's there. On the Route 5 corridor, there's no crosswalk to get from the sidewalk to that town. So you see a lot of pedestrians just playing Frogger, getting coming from Hanover or elsewhere, going down to the farmer's market. Like there's literally no infrastructure there. People are still using it. So I think that's the problem sentiment is either I would bet dollars to donuts that there are more crashes on Route 5 than a lot of other smaller streets in town. And that it's sort of a crash waiting to happen to the pedestrians crossing with no crosswalk, no pedestrian signal on that corridor. So we also have to think about the sort of eventualities that could come to pass with inaction on a quick time frame. So I think that's the sort of problem statement, is like we have a clear project that aligns with a lot of the thinking and planning you all have done. And can we do something where, yeah, we do it's an open call for, I defer to you all the process, but I would be more than happy to engage parents and families in a process to sort of give feedback on that corridor, give you all the kind of direction that you need to support the grant. And I forgot to mention, but Rita at the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Planning Commission can do most of the drafting of the grant too. She told me that explicitly. So there, in terms of staff burden, your burden will hopefully be a little bit easier too. She just followed, I emailed her earlier on this competing grants thing, and she said, not at all. It won't increase your odds of getting a future grant.
Yeah, what I was saying, you can't apply for a municipal planning grant 2 years in a row.
Oh, got it. Okay. So yeah, this wouldn't conflict with it. And she said, if I guess if there's multiple grants open at the same time, it can get complicated, but I don't think that would be the case. I think this would be a discrete window, the planning process.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see the actual guidance.
Of course,
for the
yeah.
grant.
I just emailed it to you.
Okay, thank you.
So tonight we need to move on, but I think if people agree, we should keep this on the agenda for our coming meeting, and try and turn that corner. Try and say, all right, this out of the 3 or 4 options we could jump on, the Beaver Meadow Loop that has been talked about. Okay, we beat our heads against the wall and got a wider gravel shoulder. Great, we could talk about this a lot, but if we can settle on one, let's do it. But to be clear, it will be the town, specifically the select board, that will vote to apply for this grant. Doesn't matter how many excited townspeople we have. It'll be a vote of the select board that says we're doing it. And so we just need to always keep that in mind. That's the process. So we're going to have townspeople coming to the planning commission, coming to the select board, and helping it happen.
Yeah, and the planning department has no more money for matches.
Okay.
So the select board would have to authorize the funding of the 20% from some other envelope.
I've met with this.
They can. They've got the money.
They've got the
They
money.
had aside
funds.
sidewalks and
Yeah,
paths and all
Yeah,
that.
they have.
Yeah.
When we did the
At least.
Beaver Meadow thing, they put some money
Yeah.
on the side. for
In
it.
fact, I think we were encouraged, the select board, there's a whole pile of money sitting in a sidewalk fund currently that has just been accruing and not utilized, so I think, there's money out there.
Can I just ask one quick process question, and then I'll really shut up, but just so I have sort of a clear carry back to the families. So first of all, thank you for being open to this. I really appreciate you trying to wedge this in alongside all the other work. Much appreciated. It sounds like if it's on the agenda next month, is that a good opportunity to bring other families and sort of start indicating support for Route 5? Or how do you sort of see the process playing out?
I'm happy to get other people's thoughts. And in my mind, support's not the issue. If we've got a representative that says, I got 20 or 30 people that are excited about this, the chicken and egg starting point here, the seed we need is enough specificity and enough commitment to a single idea or a single corridor. That's what. So if you go and talk to people and say, that's what we talked about, and you say, here's the proposed corridor, and people said, yeah, that's as good as any. Let's get behind that. I can get behind that. It doesn't take you and a friend or whatever coming to the next meeting and reporting that.
Okay, that's super helpful.
This is the same thing that I looked at earlier.
There's 2 grants on there. Do you want me to point it out?
No.
Okay.
What's the timeline on that?
Let's take that.
Thank you. That's the last thing I want to say. So it's due in June. The grant that has the 20% match is due in June. So I think, as long as we're like back at the table with a sense of direction, I think Rita said basically February, March, they could plug in and help if the town decides.
And then we're awarded the money the next year.
It would be later this year.
Okay.
Yeah, awarded, and implementation 2027, or not implementation, sort of like the process.
Yeah.
Late 2026.
So if people support it in general, in principle, then I would say let's have the interested parties work with Stephen enough and Rita and come back to the February meeting with enough specificity so that we're in a position to do something concrete.
That's great.
It's the federal grant.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but state administered. Yeah, sorry for not being clear about that.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. I deal
Anything
with
else?
that.
Let's park that one unless people have a burning other topic. And we'll
Thank
do
you all so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
that, Miller. Now, if
Stephen,
you're
I'll reach
going to
out.
pick up a whole box of Cheerios, Miller, that all you need is
Thank you.
Yeah.
a Labrador Retriever. That's all you need for that.
Our dog doesn't like Cheerios.
Oh, that is too bad.
Miller, I'm assuming the Jeff with the red hood,
Yes.
is he here in support of?
I don't know if somebody named Jeff signed, actually.
Yeah.
I can look
Okay,
at
we
it.
just,
That's not one of your Jeffs.
no,
Okay.
it doesn't matter. We should have you.
Oh.
All right, now. All right,
Okay.
we will.
Mystery.
Yeah.
We'll see. If they cause too much trouble, you can throw them off, Stephen. But I haven't.
No, it's not that. We just need him for, need the name, full name for the,
Right.
attendance.
Open meeting rules. Yes. Okay, let's move to the FLU maps in Tier 1B, and I do want to address a question from Mary as we jump into this. So we put two things together. One was somewhat looking backwards, which is the FLU mapping exercise that went on over the last couple of months with Two Rivers, and then looking forward, which is the Tier 1B designation topic that Stephen can talk to in a minute. But Mary's question was around the 3 bullet item point that Stephen wrote up and sent to Two Rivers about specifically on the Hawk Pine piece of those bullets that said put a Hawk Pine into the village area. And just so, Mary, I'm sorry that my apologies partly because it did feel rushed at the end of the year. The way I remembered it, and I confirmed this with Stephen, but we had a meeting.
Right, and you had a prior meeting, so I raised the question, and let me articulate for myself the question that I raised. At the last meeting we had, there was a reference to the fact that it had been discussed at the prior meeting that the Hawk Pine neighborhood would be included as a recommendation into the downtown district. And I asked, as a resident there, I asked why. And because it has not been considered that, and I don't know what the implications were. And I was told that one of the major things is it's in walking distance. It is in walking distance down a trail on private land, kind of basically on a cliff. And I can do it most of the year. In the wintertime, I might need my spikes to do it. I would say probably a good percentage of the people in Hawk Pine probably can't walk down there. And so it says that the commission feels that a portion of the neighborhood should be included in the village area. But at the end of that meeting, the conversation was we were going to discuss it again. That was very clear that we were going to discuss it again. And, and I feel like this overstepped what had been, so then it wasn't discussed again. It went off and we weren't copied on it. We weren't asked to opine ahead of time. It went off at that time. And I don't know, it says also the Planning Commission recommends something. Was there a vote on this recommendation?
So yeah, and
on the transfer station, was there a recommendation? And the same thing on Hobson, was there a vote on the recommendation? But I don't believe personally that, and also if we're a group that wants to get feedback from people, talk to people at Hawk Pine. Do they think that they're part of the downtown area because they can walk down a cliff to get there? I don't think so.
I definitely hear you, Mary, and I'm sorry that it happened this way at the end of the year, because what happened, I remember it the way you remember it at the meetings, that there was a vote at a prior meeting when you weren't there for those 3 recommendations. And then we opened it up again and we were talking about it, at the December meeting. The assumption, my assumption, I think Stephen's at the time, during the December meeting was that Two Rivers' timing for getting their public comments was long enough that we would be able to have the January meeting and talk about it again, talk about it more. What we learned before Christmas and after the December meeting was no, Two Rivers needs needs any town comments by the end of the year. So they changed, at least that was news to me, and it said we can't wait till the January meeting. We need to submit anything we want to say. And so at that point, we fell back to the motion that was made and the agreement that was made by the Planning Commission to make those three statements. And so that it was compressed and it was not satisfactory, but that was the reason that it folded back and happened using a previous discussion and not waiting till January as was the expectation was set. So I'm sorry about that.
I do think then I would say I'd like it to be reconsidered as a recommendation. I also don't see, I'm looking in the notes right now. I do see that it says that it was that recommendation. It doesn't say anything about creating a village designation for the dump area. So if that is a recommendation, it was missed in the notes. But I also think that if you promise something at a meeting, you promise you will bring a topic back for discussion, that before you then put it in writing and send it as a recommendation when it has been raised again, briefly discussed, and we could have discussed it then, but we chose to delay it, then it needs notification of members of the Planning Commission.
Understood. I think, and I'm happy to hear other people's thoughts, but I don't disagree with you, Mary. And it was compressed at the end of the year. Maybe let's park that. I'm not ending the conversation, but I think it's useful to bring up the Tier 1B and the whole topic, because there's a difference or a difference in importance or impact between what the proposed future land use maps say now, and then Tier 1B, which actually piggybacks on them, might have different boundaries and has different meaning. So we want to look at the whole thing, but if the group wants to, I am perfectly happy to open that up. I went back and forth with Kevin Geiger on something else today, and saw the note that said he had a note that said the draft FLU maps are closed at this time while they're taking other comments on getting ready for Tier 1B conversations. So it's all of a bundle, but I'm happy to hear other comments as well.
Well, I would like to know kind of what portion of the neighborhood are you recommending? Was there more delineation on that? And again, this idea close proximity to a trail, and I'm happy to take anyone on that trail. Maybe we go on a nice icy day and you all see how close proximity it is to downtown, because you can just slide right down. It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think
it's not just the clock plan. Let me bring up the future land use map from Two Rivers, so you guys can see the present sort of locked in.
Well, and I think to that point as well, just from a consistency point of view, we would be comparing it to something like, okay, what does it mean to be walkable from Foggs to the school? What does it mean to be walkable from the town garage along that road to get to town? Because those are all three of those are the ones we talked about and proposed, including expanding the village area to include, and hoofing it from the town garage, to the previous conversation with a, 3 or 5 year old on a bicycle next to you, is it's not going down a cliff, but it's not exactly a walkable village area sort of feeling.
Right. And let's think not just about 3-year-olds, but let's think about 80-year-olds too, because I think that's another part of our community. We talk a lot about the little munchkins, but we have older people too. And it's not walkable to get from, it's easier to walk from your house than it is, from my house to get downtown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a cliff.
So,
I see an arm and a hand. Let's go with the arm in the room first. Is that Vince?
Christian here, yeah.
Christian. Okay.
My remembering of the conversation with Two Rivers and the way that they're doing the land use analysis, walkability is one of the factors, but basically the goal here is we're trying to get something that makes common sense when you look at an aerial map of the town of Norwich, like this, 2-mile, 3-mile, 4-mile concentric circle with significant housing density makes up the town village. And so whether there's a current sidewalk there or not, really doesn't this would also open up the avenue for future, pedestrian bike ped things to go through beyond where they currently do to connect to Hawk Pine in future years. I don't know, it doesn't really seem like there's a negative the way that they're describing it to be designated as part of the village center. From what especially given the fact that Hawk Pine is, Jeff will go on and on about this, is like there's not future soils to increase capacity and density and new housing there. So it's not like it's gonna change the scope of Hawk Pine. And it's just really a point of process to me is I totally see Mary, but I wasn't involved. I didn't know the letter went out until I reviewed the packet yesterday for this meeting. So I also didn't see that. I also say we met with Two Rivers. There's public comment on the internet in which very few people in town left public comment. I did include asking them to include Hawk Pine in maybe August. We've talked about it in August, September, October, November meeting. We took a vote. I think this has been on the agenda for quite a long time. Whether or not we were correctly apprised of the actual letter going out, I don't know. But to me, we did have a vote. I'm open to rediscussing it, but the actual process felt pretty clear until the actual letter went out.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. Jeff LaBelle?
Yeah, thank you. I do want to just to clarify, there's a village center, and then there's a village area, and they're two different things. So the village center is still a fairly narrow, exactly where you think it might be. The village area is just a somewhat broader area around the village center. And I think the core concept there is when you look at all of Norwich, right, this very large area, what is the area around the village center where you would expect to see, the majority of development, either because it's already there or because it's an area where you're planning, you'd like to see development, So I when you look at this big area, we haven't put the village area all the way up, Beaver Meadow Road or all the way out, Union Village Road. I mean, it's still fairly tight. And, I think the reason the Affordable Housing Subcommittee recommended Hawk Pine be included is just a fairly dense settlement block, that's fairly proximate to the village center. It just seemed to kind of make sense to be all part of it. It doesn't have any practical implication really, other than, if an area is a village area, it means you have the option of designating it as a tier 1B area. You don't have to. That's a separate decision that you can make later. But it also entitles you to certain benefits if you apply for funding to the state. So if it's a village area, you get access to planning funding for affordable housing, or for, if you wanted to investigate possibility of future wastewater, so there's very little downside, in my view. It's not declaring that this is now part of the downtown. That's not that. It's just kind of like, when you look at the whole big map, where would you like to see most, where do we think most of the development either has happened or will happen in the future?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not commenting on the process you all follow, just on the substance.
Yeah, but to that point, the sort of decision window we have to opt in or opt out of Tier 1B status for the village area and the village center is quite compressed right now. The Two Rivers, they've sent out letters to select boards across the region asking for meetings in February. So we pushed back on that, and in order to sort of gain consensus and make a recommendation to the select boards on our opinion on whether to opt in or opt out. But that's going to happen quickly. And if we don't opt in, or we decide to opt out, that's going to run for the duration of the regional plan, which is 8 years. So.
Oh, really? I didn't realize that. So,
yeah.
Can you give us some background? I think Jeff LaBelle's comments are very helpful, and Christian's as well, in the sense that the village center and the village area are, they should pass the sniff test. They should look sensible on the map to say, here's a contiguous thing that is wrapped around the village center, and that's where you can kind of identify it. What is Tier 1B? What does that mean? And what are the pros and cons of making that application for designation? Because we're supposed to be the experts on this, so that when Two Rivers is talking to the select board, we already know what's going on and what we want to happen.
Yeah. All of the tier designations are products from the Land Use Review Board, and essentially they are Act 250 exemptions. So Tier 1A, which I believe in our region is only found in the town of Hartford, essentially exempts any housing developments from Act 250 review. That's Tier 1A, and there's sort of statutory regulations that you have to comply with or criteria that you have to meet in order to get that designation. Tier 1B is also an Act 250 exemption, but it is limited in scope. It's limited to housing developments up to 50 units. That doesn't mean that instantly we're going to have applications for 50-unit developments. It's anything that prior would have qualified for Act 250 review in terms of housing, I think, which is 10 units or more, would be subject to Act 250. If we opt into the Tier 1B status, we would rely on our local zoning regulations to review those developments up to 50 units. So it's essentially, it removes a regulatory, sort of state level regulatory burden on housing development. And that's it. That's all it is. If you opt into the Tier 1B status within your village area and your village center, if a developer is applying for up to 50-unit development, local regulation and review process would replace Act 250.
Well,
does that make sense?
They would remain there anyway. They would be there either way, local,
right?
But
right.
You wouldn't have the added review of Act 250 on that. So right now, you could, if you were doing a 9-unit housing project inside the village area, you would have local zoning and DRB and so forth that you needed to comply with, and that's it. And then right now, out Tier 1B, if you wanted to do a 15 or an 18-unit thing inside the village area, you would have to do local zoning and regs and Act 250. And if a Tier 1B designation, then you could go up to 50 without triggering Act 250, but the local DRB process and so forth stays for all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. it's-
So we were talking about opting into tier 1B.
Yeah.
Is that for the entire, if that can only be in the village area?
That's correct.
So any area outside of that, you can. Okay, and then when you opt in, is that a portion of the village area, or is that what's the scope of?
It's the full extent of the village area and the village center. So that whole area, any development within those boundaries.
Got it, okay.
Is that required? I mean, is that it must use the same boundary of the village area
Yes,
center? That is our only option. We either
yes.
ask for tier 1B of that whole area or not. We don't come in and say we want to draw a new boundary for our tier 1B request.
Correct. No, we do not draw a new boundary. I mean, it's true in our case, that the tier 1B also applies to planned growth areas, but we don't have any of those mapped in the town of Norwich.
But it
So, I mean,
doesn't
I feel
apply,
like a good
does
point-
not apply to transition areas.
That's what I was about to ask, yeah. Transition areas are essentially our planned growth areas, or what we would like.
Yeah, I don't.
What has been discussed as a potential planned growth area.
Yeah, that was my understanding, but I'm not entirely sure. I think, when I was first when this was first presented to me by Two Rivers, they had our transition area classified as a planned growth area.
Okay.
So I'd have to.
And that's near the town
I
border.
mean, I think that's it's certainly an important question because
Yeah.
some of those areas, if you look and say, oh, we have this nice contiguous concentric circles around the village, and that's our village area, and that's why we added the Hobson Road and so forth, that has these green patches down by River Road and along Farmers Market down Route 5 that we intended at least to be treated the same as other village areas things. So I would hope that they could be included in a tier 1B designation and not somehow because they're transition and not planned growth, they can't be. Jeff Lubell?
Yeah, I'd have to.
I believe that my understanding is that transition areas are not eligible for tier 1B. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding.
Okay, can you confirm that, Stephen?
Yeah, I don't
And so
think they are.
if those were designated as planned growth instead of transition, it seemed like that was the general intention of the group.
Yeah,
Could that planned growth areas independently be considered tier 1B, or does that come with the village area also?
I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah,
that was kind of my understanding of the general idea of the tier 1B would be to almost like
yeah.
set aside those areas as that. I don't think there's too much interest in setting the village area as the tier 1B, at least from what the discussions I've heard.
Well, let me give you
Say that again. Say that again, Vince. What did you?
Oh, it was just the idea of tier 1B seems more desirable in our transition area / planned growth areas like River Road and over there than designating the center of the town based on the public comment was. At least that's where I thought the intention. That's where I thought the intention of this was.
Okay.
So that makes it seem like all these are included.
So that's why I was curious if there was a way to, if you could designate them independently or not.
Yeah.
I guess there would be a discussion, like I could.
Changes in
We are
neighborhoods.
going to,
See it
you know,
way.
I think there's some mapping between centers and neighborhoods. Yeah.
That concept's sure.
so the next stage, just so people are clear, the next stage is that Two Rivers is going to come talk to us about tier 1B designation. Now, Stephen, I assume it's fast, but it's a multi-step process. It's not like they were going to come talk to the select board for background and us, but it's not like we're going to have to be ready to vote on whether we want a designation. So we have a chance the first time they come to ask some of these questions, to say, hey, look at our map, look at our maps. We want, how do we get tier 1B on Route 5 South, but not Hawk Pine, or not out towards the dump, or what, you know, can we pick and choose? That I would want to talk to Two Rivers about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to bring their finalized, you know, regional plans for approval to the land use review boards sort of promptly, like in April. And I think they understand that select boards are pretty busy February and March with budget stuff. So I think they're preemptively trying to get ahead of that, because they, you know, they'll need an answer before they can submit their plans for approval. All of these plans have to be approved by the end of this year. All 13 of them, or 11. So, and they can't be, you know, so they want to give, you know, towns an opportunity to sort of reflect on tier 1B, but in a sort of short window of time. Because they need to get those plans approved by the end of the year, and that's a part of it.
All right, I say Christian, let your hand, and then Ernie.
Yeah, Ernie, for you. Is that in your hand, Ernie?
Ernie?
Okay, yeah. I have a question, and I must have missed again. Why are, well, first of all, what do they mean when they say that tier 1 areas and tier 1A and tier 1B areas are exempt from Act 250? What exactly are they exempting them from? And why, really, the other part of my question.
You know what Act 250 review is?
That's the whole point, right?
Well, the why is they're trying to encourage housing. They're trying to move one hurdle, and it could be one hurdle that neighbors can use to throw lawyers at to stop a project, or, you know, basically they're saying Act 250 makes it harder to site housing. If you take it away, it's easier to site housing. It encourages housing.
My understanding of Act 250 is that it laid down rules that you knew in advance what you would be coming up against, and you could plan for it. And the statistic was that less than 2% of projects that were challenged based on Act 250 were not built. 98% succeeded, and only 2% did not. So I don't think. See, this looks a little too much like a Republican governor who's a builder wanted this. I'm sketchy on this right now. I mean, we got to work with it, I guess. I don't know. Do we have to work with this?
Oh, we don't. The town does not have to request a tier 1B designation.
I think it's helpful. I mean, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but the point of this building housing, but to limit where housing is being constructed. So like the point here is to make denser village areas, settlement areas, and not have sprawl that impacts ecosystem and environment that people love in Vermont. And so the point of this is you take a small area, reduce one hurdle, and people could potentially build. But we're not. But just Ernie, I think the reason I would say be supportive of this is like it's not signaling that we are doing anything. They still have to go through the DRB. They still have to pass all of the town rules. This is just the state environmental rules around it. They're saying they will remove one hurdle. So it's not like we're like endorsing or like opening it up to mass development, or like the town will have no say. Like all the other stuff still applies. It's just like this one thing is out of the way.
But that's my question is that those hurdles were not very big hurdles. They were very small hurdles really for builders. They were common sense too. I don't know why are they changing things?
Some people might not have even started a project if they have to go through Act 250. So it's tough to tell how many times.
My understanding too is it's not who wins in court eventually. It's like the years-long delay of being dragged through environmental review can oftentimes, like if you're a small developer building 8 houses and you then have to sit on land for 3 years and go through legal review and process and bureaucratic process, that's enough to disincentivize building those houses in the first place.
Yeah. And we have
Sorry, just
Go
to,
ahead, yeah.
Just hold for a second. I'm gonna go Mary, and then, but I'm looking at the time.
Yeah, that's one thing I'd like to say is could we have this be the primary conversation of it? You know, we spent all this time hearing about other things, but can we just have a meeting and focus on this because it's so critical, and especially when, you know, Stephen said they need to have their final plan, and you know, I mean, you said final draft or whatever by April, and we're at very basic questions right now as a group. I think it needs more focus and more full attention. So, you know, could we have a special meeting where this is the only agenda item and try to have it be a good meaty discussion where we all, you know, I mean, when we were there in the room and they brought the maps, and that was a great start, but then it sort of hasn't had that same energy. Because I have, you know, I have the
Mary,
same questions.
Talking about Act 181 and its implications for over a year.
Well, yeah, but
Stephen, maybe I'm just in stupid, but I'm just saying that I don't think that starting this discussion at 8:20 when
I agree.
when clearly there's a lot of confusion in the group. And I agree. I mean, I've been trying to read all of this, but when you do it for 10-minute snippets once, you know, let's see if we can find some good time and have a proper discussion.
I agree. And that was my point to point out time is that I think I want to be able to work with Two Rivers, meaning I don't want them to show up, talk to the select board, and we need to be the ones that are the supposed experts, and we haven't been able to get our own act together. So my question, Stephen, then is, if we talk with Two Rivers, I want to know what their timing is for a meeting. And then I think there's a sequence. There's like, we could generate some questions. We've heard some tonight about boundaries and transition zones and things like that. So we have a few questions for Two Rivers. Then I would like to have some time for the group to talk before the Two Rivers visit. So I want to know whether the Two Rivers visit is in 3 weeks or 5 or 6 weeks. And then we decide. If this group is willing, I am certainly would encourage a special meeting to devote to this so that we can have our act together to both talk to Two Rivers, but to talk to the select board and Two Rivers.
Would it make sense for us to hold this special meeting and have Kevin from Two Rivers attend? Or we could just that. I'm sure they could.
If he's willing to listen to the town specific growth debate, we're going to have a few questions for him, and then we're going to talk amongst ourselves. If he wants to see that or participate in it, fine. But I think a lot of the meat of what we want to talk about is Norwich specific.
I'll find out what they're thinking.
So do people agree we need more time? And if that timing does not work with Two Rivers' schedule, that we're willing to do a special meeting before our February meeting? People with me on that? Okay. I'd then propose that, and we will get back to you on scheduling, because I'm gonna fade very quickly here. Ernie probably is too, and we're past our pumpkin hour anyway. So I'd like to, Jeff Lubell, do you have any very quick?
Just quickly, one idea, if you did have a special meeting, maybe we could consolidate the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, could join you all. We could have a broader conversation on the 26th or 27th. I guess you would normally do it on the 27th or something like that. That might work. I mean, I feel like this is such an important topic. We'd like to get, the full range of views.
Agreed.
So
And
if
we,
you, and then
yes.
one idea, another idea would be to ask, if you don't want Kevin to be necessarily, we don't need him for the whole meeting, maybe he just joins remotely for the first 15 minutes where we ask some clarifying questions just about the
Yep.
policy, and then he can jump off and we can have a full conversation.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. That's a people. Thank you.
That's good. If we're gonna do a special meeting on the 26th, we might have to start a little bit later. The fire district's annual meeting, which apparently will only last 15 minutes, is on the 26th.
Well, we could, and we'll look at 26, 27, but let's
The
figure
27th
out-
is a Tuesday, though. You could do it then.
Let's figure out Two Rivers' need or plan. I
Yeah,
just don't.
26 is much better for me.
Okay.
Either one works for me.
Yeah, let's see what we can do. And if we need to do, I think special meeting, we can actually do Zoom only if we want to, which gets us away from some room headaches if necessary. But so let's keep that in mind, and that's the plan. But thank you. I do think this deserves bright-eyed and bushy tail. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes of December 9th?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just asking for comments. All right. Call that. All those in favor of approving the minutes of December 9th?
Aye.
Okay, Bob, abstain.
Did Bob abstain?
Yeah.
Stephen, did you have another comment?
I just wanted to ask the remaining Jeff if he could put his last name in a chat or unmute to let us know so we can record you as attending the meeting.
Any help?
Sorry, there's no chat. Can you hear me? Last name is Bremer, Bruemmer.
Did
Okay.
you get that? Thank you.
All set. All right. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Good conversation. We'll let you know on the next step.
Thanks,
Thank
all.
you. Bye.